And we're live. Hello, welcome to the Mansfield Buzz. I'm your host, Jordan Hough. Today, I heard he couldn't be with us because he is taking care of his family, like the awesome man that he is. So he left me in charge. So apologies in advance. You are at my disposal. Today, I have with me Rachel Elliott, who's also known as Oracle Next Door. She is also my significant other, so this is going to be a really interesting podcast. I don't usually get to put her on the hot seat, so this will be very fun. Now, before we get started, I do have a couple of announcements. We are Mansfield Buzz. You can catch us at YouTube/Mansfield Texas Buzz. We are live every Thursday at 2 p.m. And we cover the buzz from the local Mansfield businesses. So if you want to come in here, have a chat, this is really the place that is for you because we want to focus on you, your story, and let everybody know how awesome you are, the services that you bring to the community, and just have a casual conversation where you could just relax, tell us what your business is about, a little bit of what got you into it, and we can just share with everybody. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest for today. This is Rachel Elliott. How are you doing?
I'm good. Mildly low-key freaking out for someone who went to bed not knowing they were going to be on a podcast this morning. But I'm here. I'm going to tap into my Aries and just do it.
So Rachel is an astrologer. She does astrology readings. She does tarot readings. She's got a vast background in the divination arts, metaphysics, and spiritual background. She's really into crystals too. It's all around super cool chick to talk to. So this is going to be fun. So to get this thing started and to get everybody through it, I'm really excited about this because I've seen this from my perspective and it's been fascinating. So I want to talk to you about just what got you into this line of work? What got you into the, as we call them, the esoteric arts? It's a path that is not normally, it's not, like when they tell you you're going to grow up, like I don't see many kids saying like, I'm going to grow up and be an astrologer, right? Like you usually get like doctor or firefighter or ninja, oddly enough. But nevertheless, you are here and I'd love to hear about sort of what forces came into play that brought you to this point.
So just from like childhood, my earliest memory of anything having like any kind of esoteric presence in my field was from childhood, and my elementary school brought in like a portable planetarium or planetarium. And we got to spend we got to spend like an hour in there, and they just showed us like all the different constellations. I must have been maybe 7 or 8. So this was very early on. And then we got to go to the library weekly, and I always checked the same book out, and it was a mythology book, like mythological creatures. And I checked it out week after week after week. Just really devouring things of like symbology and loving the language of symbols and myth. And that's very similar to the language of astrology when we connect the planets to Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, and we like listen to their stories, and then we look at how they're kind of playing within our own embodiment and world. I deviated from that for a long time, just kind of trying to fit in society and find my place and go to school and make good grades and do the things that people wanted me to do until about the age of 28, 29, when I was just like, there's gotta be more. There's something more for me out there. I wasn't really like truly happy. I didn't feel like I was really being myself. And that is when I found the School of Metaphysics in Dallas. And I spent about 3 years there studying metaphysics, different spiritual
And for the people that don't know what metaphysics are, like what is that?
It's like the science of what is unseen. So, like, science explains a lot of like the things that we can see, organisms, biology, and it's kind of the science of what is not seen. So, like, forces at play. So, the law of attraction is one thing that comes to mind as like a universal law.
Mm-hmm. So you went through the School of Metaphysics. I know, to fill in a little bit of gaps, at the time you were a massage therapist.
Yes.
And you wanted a little bit more, so then you found the School of Metaphysics and you joined, and you spent 3 years studying there.
I did, and they taught me different practices like meditation, dream interpretation. So again, here's a language of symbols speaking to me every night, and then like kind of being able to decode that really helped me understand myself and what was happening like in my mind on a subconscious level. I had a lot of dreams about like my teeth falling out was a commonly like reoccurring theme for me. So it's like, okay, once you understand that means like you're stressed or you're not really feeling like you can speak what you want to speak, like just things having to do with the mouthpiece. It really helped me kind of step into myself and understand myself on another level.
Okay, that's fascinating. I think we can all have at least one recurring dream that was just like, oh my God, what does this mean? Why do I keep showing up to my exam and I haven't studied or shown up to class all year?
Right.
So then you went through metaphysics, and then what was it that then started drawing you towards astrology?
Well, I think it was actually COVID. I found Astrology Hub and I started listening to podcasts. It was something that had always interested me, but astrology really is like a whole nother language. There are so many different levels to really become fluent in. And it was just kind of a little window into like beginning to understand that myself. And then you gifted me my first astrology reading with one of my favorite teachers, actually in Dallas, Britton LaRue. So I've been studying with her and as well as learning from Astrology Hub and just like devouring every little piece I could get on all of my daily commutes and just over the course of the years.
So then, it was around COVID time and you started doing that. And then you've gone really, like you've devoted, I mean, honestly, you've been a full-time student of astrology since then. And now you are launching your business, right? Oracle Next Door, which I think is fascinating and so exciting to take this full on. I've been really, on my end of things, I've thanks to you, I've met amazing people that are so well versed in this unseen, right? I love that you put it that way, like the forces of the unseen, and it's been really, really interesting for me coming from all the way from I would have called myself a skeptic because I've always been a very like strategic thinker, right? Like it's all about how do you play with the environment that you see, and then you try to plan for the unknown, but not necessarily give so much power to unseen external forces, which at the time my mind was just like, nope, you can't see it, can't measure it, doesn't exist. And I think there's a lot of that. But I love that through your journey, I've been, it's opened my eyes to a lot of that. So I would love to go a little bit into astrology, because it's one of the things that for me was very surprising, and I think for our audience will be as well, because what is astrology for and how do you use it? Because I came in contact with astrology just reading horoscopes. Like that was kind of what I saw, and it was always about your sun sign, right? Actually, I wore my hat, right? This is the Aquarius sign. And here's the traditional Aquarius sign for it. And actually, it's really cool because now that's the constellation. But that's as far as it went. So it was all about like, oh, you're gonna encounter an interesting conversation, or like, I mean, you read it from the girls' magazines, it's like, oh, you're gonna find a love interest, and like every other month there was a potential love interest. And when I started really hanging around people that knew astrology to a much deeper level, there is a lot more depth to it, and particularly a lot of opportunities that can have it. So I'd love for you to walk me through just what, like, in your opinion, what is astrology for, and what are the best ways we can leverage all this knowledge?
Mm-hmm. So what is astrology for?
Let's start with that.
I think it depends. Well, astrology, as I see it, is the language of the stars. And your natal chart is like a snapshot of where the planets were placed at the time of your birth.
You mentioned natal chart. That's what's a natal chart? The snapshot. Like, is that something that everybody has?
Everybody has one. You can get the most accurate one if you know your birth time. So you need your birthday, birth time as accurately as possible. If you don't know it, you can always kind of calculate it for noon, and that'll get you close. But planets, we consider the moon a planet in astrology, and the moon moves very quickly. So some things may change if you don't have like a truly accurate time. But yes, it's a snapshot of the sky at the time, day, and place of your birth. So those are like the 3 ingredients that you need to get an accurate chart. And what I use it for, it really started, I mean, my whole journey, it's really been about understanding myself and like growing in love and compassion and grace for myself. Happiness with who I am. And then I found that really helped me have more meaningful connections with others, because now that I was secure in who I was and happy with who I was, I could present myself more authentically with the people around me, and not fall into like this judgment or fear so much of like, what are people going to think of me? Are they going to like me? Oh, I bet they're thinking this. It kind of allows all that inner chatter to kind of fall away, and I could just able to like own more of myself and take really more responsibility for how I was navigating through life. And then as I progressed in like my fluency with the language, now I can use it for more like timing, for projects or things that I want to bring out into the world, or just knowing like what's going on, kind of the astrological weather, like what's favorable for me.
That's really cool. One cool aspect of it too is the something that I've like, it's even started influencing me, and it's been really cool, is how, well, I mean, this is based on the star movements, right? So these is the cycles, right? You mentioned the moon is one of the faster moving objects in the sky. The moon has a cycle, and all these planets revolve around the sun as well as ours. So these are all cycles, and paying attention to the cyclical nature of things gets you thinking of time it gets you out of a linear way of thinking and really gives you think of a cyclical, which is really interesting because, I mean, I see it in marketing, right? Like we have our quarters, and everybody that is in retail right now is starting to gear up for Q4, because that's when the major shopping happens, and happens in a cycle, right? So we have, summer is typically the slow time. Q4 is whenever you're like really ramping up, because that's when all the sales go, like all these cycles. It never occurred to me to use that for my own personal life, which is crazy. But, you think about like lunar cycles, which are like 28 days, and then you go into like the bigger ones, which we'll get into. And it's amazing when you actually look at your trajectory mapped out in cycles. And it opens a whole new door for you. You're like, oh my God, okay, there's something at play here with my own evolution that is really cool. So I mentioned earlier my initial encounter with astrology was the horoscope, and I think it might be for a lot of people that are not maybe all that versed in it. So is a horoscope astrology? Where does that fall into the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, horoscopes are accessing astrology. Typically, they're written from a sun sign perspective, and the sun sign is what you know, yes, from your date of birth. So it's not accessing the time and the location aspect. So I think it's important to mention that everyone has all 12 signs, even the ones you don't like. They are a part of you.
You mean I have Leo in me?
Yes, you do. The opposite of Aquarius. You have it, and that's actually why I'm wearing pink today. It is Leo season. We have a Leo new moon coming up, and it took me a long time to be able to embody my own Leo. Like that, I think when we're denying something like that, why do you not feel comfortable to shine from your heart space? Because Leo's confident, right? There's this lion-heartedness and this ability to walk through the world with confidence, like you have, like you're wearing a crown, like you are a main character energy. I got a little off topic, but yes, horoscope is accessing astrology. I think people should always listen for their sun sign and their rising sign. Your rising sign is occupies your first house, and that's going to tell you more like how you move through the world, how you kind of initiate things.
You mentioned something new, right? You said your rising sign, which is another. It's dictated by a planet.
It's dictated by where the horizon was at the time and location of your birth. That's what kind of sets the tone for the entire chart. So although you're an Aquarius sun, you're a Cancer rising. So that occupies your first house and how you move through the world. Now, Aquarians are usually known for being kind of aloof and emotional and really cool. But having that Cancer rising, you have just you lead with such a big heart, just knowing you. So it can tell you a lot more about, usually they say it's kind of like what we meet. We meet the rising sign first.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And then just real quick, you mentioned something else that I think a lay person like myself has trouble with. And you mentioned it's in your first house and it sets up the chart. Right. So can you tell me a little bit about that? What do you mean by house?
So this is where we get into the language and the fluency and the depth of astrology. Because
so then let me actually set you up properly.
Okay.
Because you've mentioned my sun sign, Aquarius. You have different signs, which I didn't know for the longest time. It's I thought it was just an Aquarius and that's it, right? And then I met other Aquarius that I found incredibly annoying. I'm like, there's no way we're the same because you're irritate me and you're so rude. And they say you don't like. Well, they do say that you don't like about other people things you don't like about yourself. So maybe that's why. Mm-hmm. But you also mentioned I'm a Cancer rising, so I have the Aquarius and I have the Cancer sign. And something that I've started hearing more often now, and people ask me, is okay, so what are your top three? So what are your top three means? So
your top three is talking about your sun, your moon, and your rising sign. That looks like, oh yeah, this reflection's got me off. Your sun, your moon, and your rising sign. So that's why the whole birth data, usually you can find that on your birth chart. And if your birth chart, your birth certificate, or ask your parents or someone who was there, maybe you can get something kind of close.
But if you know your time, place, and date, time, and place of birth, then you can find out your top three signs, which is your sun sign.
Mm-hmm.
What's the second one?
Your moon.
moon, right? Where the moon is, and that has its own sign. So for me, my moon is my moon. Hang on, don't tell me it's a Sagittarius moon.
Correct.
So the moon was in the sign of Sagittarius, the sun was in Aquarius, and then the horizon was at the Cancer sign.
Yes, you got it.
Those are your top three. I gotta say it's really cool because sometimes people ask me, it's like, oh, so you know your top three? It's like, yeah. And they're like, what? Like, the more than you think. And so what are these three signs? What kind of picture do these three signs paint?
Oh, I love that you use the word picture, because I was just thinking of the sun as like, one way that I've heard it, it's like the broad strokes. You're not going to get like, there's so much more information there other than just your sun sign, but your your sun sign kind of gives you like the broad strokes of, like, if you were a painter, like making a painting, it's kind of like the first few passes of the brush. Your sun sign is like your sense of vitality. Your moon sign is going to correlate more to like your emotional nature, your needs, as far as like feeling nurtured. If you were to like get in an argument, like, this is why I love it for relationships too. Like, does your person need space? Do you need space? Do you need to write a letter? Like, taking those things, each other's needs into consideration, can be really helpful in relationship dynamics, whether that's a romantic partner or family or friends or children. And then your rising sign, as we said, is kind of like how you initiate and move through the world. So like my sun and moon are both in Virgo. So that's very like prominent. I need a lot of like feedback telling me I'm doing a good job. Like, that's really helpful and really nurturing to me, and it gives me information to move forward with confidence. But my rising sign, Sagittarius, it's like I also like have this need for adventure and freedom, and I have a little bit of a philosophical, esoteric bend.
Don't say.
Yeah. So it's like these things I didn't know this about myself, but now I have more information to understand myself and my needs.
That's really cool.
Astrology.
So that covers your top three, but you said everybody has all signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing this top three is the tip of the iceberg, but there's probably a lot going on underneath, right?
You would be correct.
You don't have to go through everything, but could you give us a little bit more of what's going on underneath the veil?
Yeah. So you have 10 planets in your chart, sun, moon through Pluto. And those outer planets move really slow. They're going to be more like generational in nature. So people around your same age group are going to have Pluto in the same place, or at least the same sign. But someone might have their sun next to Pluto, like telling us that that's a really like Plutonian person, someone who really digs like transformation, change, going through these periods of personal like revolution. And maybe that's what the impact that they have on the people around them too. I have the planet Uranus on my ascendant, which is something that I've kind of struggled with. It's the planet of like revolution and change. It's like lightning. It like really shocks things, people, and systems. And sometimes it took me a while to really feel at peace with the fact that I might have that impact on people, and especially organizations, larger body organizations. But so there's the planets, there's also asteroids, there's the houses and the signs, and then there's the relationship that they have to each other? Are they conjunct, like with each other? Are they next to each other? Are they working together? Are they in opposition? I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the planets?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So what are the planets' relationships to one another? Are they in more of like a helpful, easy flowing place where they really understand each other? Maybe they're all in air signs, which means they're really like kind of on the same page. Or are they making like a square, which is like kind of tension? They're coming from opposite directions, or in oppositions where they're really just butting heads, but they see each other. It's like being on the opposite side of the street. So all of that is information that we're working with when looking at a natal chart.
Okay, that makes sense. And I like how it takes part like with the planets. The planets are like in specific signs. So I was wondering if maybe you could take us through some like examples of when astrology shows up for us that maybe we're not aware of, but I think, I mean, I know I've gone through this, I know you have, and I'd love to chat a little bit about this, but what is Saturn returns? And I have to admit, first time I heard about it was on a TV show. I want to say it was Parks and Recreation when they just brought it up about Saturn returns. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And later on, you got more into it and you told me about it. And I did the math back to it. I'm like, oh my God, like every one of these, well, not every, because I've only been through two. At least I think, but it's like your world is turned upside down. Well, the first one, actually, it's one, right? Because the first one is the original one and then makes a full cycle. But every time we've been here, and I'll let you do the full explanation, but I know every time this has come up, it's a time of revolution, internal revolution.
Yeah, it can feel pretty tumultuous. Saturn is the planet of like discipline and rules and boundaries. And our first Saturn return takes about 29 and a half years. So
and that is to return to the place it was during your time of birth.
Correct.
So it's
yes, it's made an entire revolution around your chart, and it's come back to where it was at the time you were born. And it's really, I mean, like, even if you think about that age, it's about 30, you're coming to terms with, like, do I like my career? Do I like my relationship? Am I on the right path? You might start having, like, all of these things kind of deteriorate or break down, or just questioning a lot of the systems, the structures that you've had in place for a long time. And they may start to, like, crumble for you so that you can, like, access a new way of doing things. Or some people look at it as getting, like, back on your path. And that's the time it was for me when I found the School of Metaphysics, when I was, like, wanting more, like, there's got to be more to life than this. And that set me off on that, like, next cycle of really finding more of a spiritual discipline that I feel like my soul craved. This kind of opening. And if you look at where Saturn is in my chart, that's in my 12th house of, like, mystery, you know, so it was very on cue and appropriate for me.
How many years is that, did you say?
It's about 29.4. If you were to look it up, is probably the answer that you would find. But you know, with those slower moving planets, you can really start to feel it sooner and afterwards. So really thinking like 28 to 30 years old.
Okay. So for you listening to this, if you're nearing 29, here it comes.
Or
If
60.
if you're 58, going on 59, here it comes.
Yeah.
If you are, let me see, I'm doing the math. 88. And if, so it's basically on your 30s, 60s, 88, getting closer to your 90s. And if you're so lucky and you hit 117, you'll do it again, fourth time.
These are all opportunities. I mean, at least from the way that I look at it, to get more in line with where it is maybe you crave to be, finding structures that work for you.
Yeah. I mean, I know mine sucked, but I was definitely the better and stronger out of it. So
Right.
it's one of those things, it's like those boot camps where like beat you up, but then you get in great shape.
Cosmic
So
boot
then,
camp.
yes, not that it always has to be, right? But for those of you interested in boot camps, I was going to ask you, what kind of service do you offer? Right, you're the Oracle next door, and so let's say I'm looking at this and I'm interested. I've always been. I love how you call it, astro curious.
Yes.
You have that curiosity about astrology, and you want to find out a little more. What do you have? What services do you offer to help us like go through that threshold?
Yes, so I offer one-on-one astrology readings. I also do tarot and oracle cards and Reiki. You can find my offerings on oraclenextdoor.simplybook.me, or connect with me on Instagram. That'd probably be my favorite place for you to reach out and say hi. And you can get to my booking page through my Instagram as well, and then on Facebook.
That's really cool. And you said you offer Reiki, tarot, and astrology.
Correct.
Okay. So part of that I'm really excited about is, can you give us a bit of a live example?
I'll do my best.
No pressure.
Right.
So we prepared for this. And if I can run Hurdy's fancy technology without them correctly, I'll be able to pull up my chart. By the way, this is terrifying. I leave it to the professionals because you're about to see a bunch of stuff. Okay, Rachel, what are we looking at?
Okay, so let's start with number 1. If you see where the number 1 is kind of in that inner yellow circle, that is the first house. And you'll see the AS right there, which stands for ascendant. That is kind of where the natal chart starts. So it'll take you through the houses, which are a whole nother conversation on their own, but they basically correlate to like different areas of your life. So the 4th is going to represent kind of like home and family. The 6th is going to be more like work and everyday activities. And the 10th is going to be like how you're seen in more of a public space, which we can see Jordan has his Mars as well as his North Node there in the 10th house. And we can see his Sun, which is the circle with a dot on the inside there in the 8th house next to his Mercury. He has both of those in Aquarius.
So if you're looking at this, it'd be towards the red and it looks like a bullseye.
Correct.
And it's a brownish color.
Yes. So then all those lines on the center, those are what we call the aspects. So that shows you the planets as they relate to one another.
And you can read this.
Believe it or not, yes.
This is a language you understand.
Yes, and you can too.
My goodness. I think I'd rather write code, and I don't like to write code. This is like code in a circle.
And it gets even more fun when we put the transits on top.
Shall we do it?
Let's do it. So now we have Jordan's chart is the inner circle. You can still see his north node in the 10th house and his sun there in the 8th. And then the outer ring is what is actually happening in the sky right now. So if you don't know, it's Leo season. So the sun is down in Leo. I'm like trying to point to it in his 2nd house across from his natal sun. So then we can compile the relationship these planets from a transiting or outer perspective are having on his natal chart.
Okay, so please explain that to me in English.
So there's what's going on in the sky, and there's you, and like what you came in with.
Now you said something interesting that I noticed, right? So there's the sun, which was for y'all, it was kind of like on the right side, and then there is the sun during my time of birth, which is on the Aquarius side. So it was kind of like on this end. And then you talked about the sun currently is in Leo, which was down at this end. So they are like in a line across from each other. Mm-hmm. And you did mention earlier about planets being in, by the way, like the sun counts as a planet in this kind of chart. And it's there, is that opposing? That's opposition, right?
That is an opposition, yes.
So what does that mean for me?
So this season is like a direct opposite from, so if you think about it, you were born in like the dead of winter. Aquarius is like fixed air. Okay.
What do you mean by fixed?
Fixed. So all of the signs, so this is another layer. All of the signs are either fixed, mutable, or cardinal. Aquarius is a fixed sign. Leo is another fixed sign. Aquarius is air, and Leo is fire. So they're like, it's like butting heads. They're both fixed in their position, and they're coming from different points of view. So, I mean, it could be looked at as a time for you to like really gain a different perspective on things. But this is a season or a personality that maybe you're a little less familiar with. Unless you know people like that in your family, and then you know exactly what it's like.
Yes, no one name names. That's really cool. And then, so you mentioned that, so they're in opposite ends. Mm-hmm. And then you had mentioned something else too. Oh yeah, I was going to ask you. So, we also have been talking about Pluto, right? And Pluto is the sign of Pluto looks like a person like giving like the hands up. Like, is this Pluto? Like,
that's pretty good. Yeah, you're even red, like, like it was.
So it's in the upper right-hand side, and I can see Pluto is right above my sun on the chart. Like, so if you find the number 8, it'll be in the upper right. Mm-hmm. That is happening right now. You actually have a video on Instagram that talks a little bit about what that's going on with that. So can you tell us a little bit about what that means for me having Pluto right on top of my sun in Aquarius? Because, I mean, it kind of freaks me out, right? Isn't Pluto like death and like dark stuff?
Well, I mean, Pluto does correlate to Hades, the god of the underworld. So there's still there's still a lot of dignity in Pluto. He is the king of death and the underworld, and what's like, you think about where you find treasure, like usually it's buried like really deep down. Pluto rules transformation processes. If you think of like the life, death, and rebirth cycles, so you can think about like a butterfly, which is very like not scary and very beautiful, but it goes through a whole entire process where it's a caterpillar, like it has legs, it's on the ground, it's kind of like slithering, and then it has this cocoon process that it goes into where its body completely like melts and turns into goo and it's completely transformed, and that's what it takes for it to become a butterfly, you know. So you can think about that like happening for yourself as something to like look forward to. Like no one knows what happens inside that cocoon except for, you know, the thing going through it, you know.
The gooify.
So you can become a butterfly. Yeah, but Pluto takes such a long time to go around. I think it's like 240 years. So none of us will live to see it like make its way completely around the chart. But we've all, I think for the most parts, felt it happening in our lives over the last 16 years. It's been in the same place. So it's kind of a big deal for it to be making a transition and headed somewhere new for all of
Where's
us.
it heading?
It's headed into Aquarius.
Aha.
Yes.
And so that's happening now, and where has it been before?
It's been in Capricorn for the last 16 years. So you can look at where Capricorn is in your chart and think about like what transitions have you been going through there. So for you, that's in like your one-on-one relationships, your partnerships, you know, your personal contracts with people. And for me, that's been in like the house of my resources, my money, my value. Like that story's been completely rewritten for me. So it can give you a lot of information about like maybe how that has been trying to work for you to move you into something new.
That's really cool. That's insightful, you know, because I mean, I could definitely relate to that and just that switch in the way, you know. And you said it. What house is mine in?
Your Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
It's your 7th house. It's right before Aquarius.
Yeah, but it's like you mentioned what that house represents. Like, did you say my contracts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your 7th house is like your one-on-one contracts with people. So you think about like your personal relationships, your friendships, romantic relationships, and then contracts as well, energetic and written.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because you and I have lived very separate lives when it comes to our working life, right? Like we've always been together outside of work, but in work wise, we've just always been very, very separate.
Mm-hmm.
And the closer we, you know, the more this advances, the more we start working with each other together, where now you're essentially my project manager for Mercurius, and then I'm your marketing arm for Oracle Next Door. And it's been really cool to leverage each other's strengths in a business point of view that is very different, right? And we've been together for 13 years. So like for the past 16 years, you know, 13 of those years we've been in a very different modality, and just recently we just switched, and it seems like it started to. And it's funny because it was accelerating to that degree, and then we sort of took a step back and started doing our own things, and now we're starting again to go into that direction of working, but to some degree for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that really interesting, because we were talking before the show about retrogrades, which is something we haven't talked about, but we did talk it before we were when we were prepping for the show. And for those you guys that don't know, is planets do this funny thing and this is because of our perspective. And I'm a very visual person, so I mean, to me, like it kind of helps to see it. But when you're looking at the planets in the sky, they're always going one way. But for some weird reason, sometimes they're like, nope, never mind, I'm going the other way, and they go backwards, and then they keep going forwards again. When they go backwards, it's called a retrograde. And you want to get sciencey about it, because I love to get sciencey about it, is because we're going around the sun. Those planets are going around the sun. We're all going. But when we hit a certain point, because one planet is moving faster than the other, to our perspective, one planet will actually go one way and then stop and start moving the other direction. So to us, that planet literally just went back forth and just did a zigzag. Those zigzags are retrogrades. Now, in an astrological perspective, I'll let the expert do the talking of what that happens. But Pluto just went through a retrograde, right?
It's retrograde currently. So it's dipping like back into Capricorn one final time before November 19th. It completely transitions into Aquarius for good. So there's a lot there to work with for all of us on wrapping up whatever we've been working on. But it makes sense to feel like you're kind of like taking some steps backward and making forward. It's totally mimicking the planet's retrograde cycle. And I think this is another reason why this is fascinating for relationships, because if I know where that's happening in his chart and where it's happening in my chart, but we're together, like it makes sense for us to be feeling this, like both in our relationship and in our resources. So when you have that kind of knowledge and perspective, you can really work together as a team to make the best of the situation and take advantage of it.
That's awesome. Such valuable information and things that are totally on the unseen side of things that, it's all there, but if you don't look for it, you won't see it. And I find that fascinating about astrology and many other things, right? Like it's just like it lives in that same space as luck, right? Like it's this area where you don't necessarily know what it is. You don't know how it works. But what I do like about astrology is this is a very ancient art. And did a pretty good job about tracking cycles. And then by tracking things, they've been able to understand the unseen, which, I'm a marketer, so I can't help it. I take it back to marketing, right? And the way that we track behavior and we track different outcomes when we put different strategies out there, after a while you start noticing some patterns, and some of them don't make sense, and then you realize that it has to do a little bit more with what is going in, like what they call the zeitgeist, right? What is going with the current, and that switches things. But then you start actually taking stock of what it is, and then you get to a point where you can actually predict it. So I totally see this applied here as just a much more ancient practice, which is complex, as you guys can see. Because guys, look at this. This is that's wild. I wish I could make it move to make it even more confusing. Oh, but Rachel, you have been a wonderful, wonderful guest, and you've been very patient with all my questions. Has there been anything that I haven't asked you that you wish to share with us?
No, I think I'd just like to share the spirit of Oracle Next Door. Oracle, like referencing like advice and guidance, and the next door being like the accessible part of it. And that is my goal, to make this kind of advice and guidance accessible to my neighbors and to the people in my community, so that they can live their best, most aligned lives and feel confident sharing themselves with their community, and just have a community of bright and vibrant people.
That's beautiful. Well, if you guys like this and want to contact Rachel, you can find her at Oracle Next Door on Instagram. And if you go to her page, there's a nice little button on the side, so you can just book her right there. It's also on Facebook at facebook.com/oraclenextdoor. It's got the same button. You can just click it and boop. You can just go straight there. I mean, the meta infrastructure, they're good at, I mean, they're as big as they are for a reason. And then if you like a plain old website, you can always go to simplybook.me. See what they did there. So now to get us down to here, let me see if I can do what Hurdy does, because he's got always this cool song he plays. Oh man, there's a ton of them. It's probably rock. Yes, that's it. We take us out. Thank you very much. This is the Mansfield Buzz. We are on live on YouTube and Facebook every Thursday at 2 p.m. here interviewing local Mansfield businesses. See what's buzzing around our community. I'm your host, Jordan Hough. We had Rachel Elliott /Oracle Makeover as our guest, and Hurdy couldn't be with us today because he is being awesome taking care of his family. So goodbye to him. And thank you so much. We will see you next Thursday at 2. Bye, y'all.